Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Digital Classroom. Today we're going to take a look at some of my favorite shots from probably this year with our model Felisa. And man, we had so much fun creating this shot, but it's pretty complicated. So grab some popcorn or whatever you like to eat, sit down and enjoy this episode of Digital Classroom. Now, one of the things in photography that I absolutely love is creating mood and atmosphere. Now, you all know that I'm a big fan of these black diffusion filters from K&F Concept. I sometimes call them black mist, but it's actually black diffusion. Now, why do I love those filters so much? Because they create beautiful lens flares and they still keep your images razor sharp. Now, during this workshop, I was using something else. I'm actually using the TT Artisan lens, the 50mm 1.4. Now, I know normally this is a manual focusable lens, and to use it in everyday work, manual focus is not really my thing. So I'm using a Photodiox or Tagart adapter, and that actually makes that manual focusable lens autofocus. So that's pretty interesting. If you want to see something more about it, just leave comments below. So how did we set something like this up? Well, the first thing is I have to set up a base. Now, the image was already in my head, but I wanted to set up a base. Now, one of the best base setups is huge light sources. Now, why do we use light sources for this? I already know that I'm going to make a very tight lighting setup. That means that I really want the attention of my model to the microphone and of course to her face. But I also want to make sure that I see the chair and that I see the rest of my model and a little bit of the backdrop. So I have to make sure that all my shadows are not too dark, but get a little bit of extra light. Now sometimes I call this technique light in light, but in this case, you can just call it a fill light. Now one of the best modifiers for a fill light is of course a huge softbox. But a huge softbox is expensive and takes up, well, a huge amount of space. And sometimes you don't have a huge amount of space. So what is the best alternative? You got it, you see it already on the image, right? So it's not really a question. It's an umbrella. Now in this case we're using the new Rogue umbrellas and I really like those. So with our umbrella setup, I'm actually aiming not for a perfect exposure, but something like 2, maybe 2.5 stops under perfect, because it's only a fill light. Now after that we did of course a strip light from the side to make sure that we get a nice accent light, a blue gel from the back to create a very nice lens flare and of course some blue atmosphere in our images. And as our main light source, I'm actually using a snoot. And I aimed the snoot only on the face of our model and the microphone. I really wanted those two to jump out. Now this is a pretty complicated setup, because when you're using a snoot from a distance, I can't focus the light enough on the face of our model. So that's also why we're using 2 flags, as you can see in the video. Now those 2 flags actually flag off our lighting. And there's a very cool trick when you're using flags. If this is your snoot and this is your model, and you place your flags here, you get a very sharp edge transfer, so very sharp shadows. If you place your flags a little bit closer to the light source, it becomes softer. So you have a tremendous amount of control over how your shadows look. Do you want them sharp or do you want them softer? Now in this case we want them pretty sharp, but with a soft edge, so that's why they're a little bit in front. But you can also experiment with this. And to be totally honest, I also, well, I have to be able to take the shot, right? And this was a very busy backdrop. So, sorry, a very busy set. Now, the first images that came in were okay, but I still missed something in the back. That's actually why we decided like, hey, there's blue light coming from the back. Maybe there's also something like stage lighting. So that's when we took in our trusses. And I don't know how you call them in English, but you can see them in the images, right? They're in the back and they're normally used to hang lighting from. So they're actually pretty accurate for that setup. So how do you get that lens flare in? Well, the first thing you have to make sure is your angle. It's very important that most of that blue light is aimed at your camera and not at your model. Now, why not at your model? Very simple. If you want to get lens flare in your lens, you need a lot of light. If you aim that light towards your model is way closer, right? You're all the way over here and your model is all the way over there, very close to that light source. So when you aim it at your model, it will totally blow out her hairs, it will totally blow out her body, and you will get a little bit of lens flare. So what we're actually using for this technique is called feathering. Now, the center of the light always emits a lot of light and the sides a little bit less. By aiming the light source away from our model and more towards the photographer, you are taking away light from our model, because you're using now the sides of the light, which are way softer in quality, but also way lower in output. And you're aiming that very harsh part straight at your lens. Now, change your angle, a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, just the other way around, just your left, my right, right? So my left is your right, right, don't even go there. You know what I mean, right? So what you do is you make sure that in your viewfinder you can see the light source, and then just take it out a little bit, and then you will see that lens flare coming in. And then you press the shutter, and that's the image you get. So it's a little bit trying to find the right angles, but it's very, very rewarding. The only problem with a setup like this, and you can already see that probably in the setup itself, is the model is very limited in how she can pose. There's actually only one way that really works, and that's with her head angled and the microphone here, because that's literally where I put the flags. If she would get up a little bit more like this, half her face would be black. Maybe that's also interesting, but it was not how the light was set up. So when you set something like this up, make sure that you, before you take the shot, know the perfect pose for your model. Because with this setup, there's only one pose that really works. But that doesn't mean that you can't shoot it from different angles. You can shoot it, for example, a little bit more wide angled, like this shot. Or a little bit closer, like this one. Or maybe you want that lens flare in completely and get more of that blue in the image, like this shot. It's all very depending on your taste. Now, do you want to hear something really funny? Officially, this shot was meant to be in black and white. But I still shot it with a blue gel, because there's one thing you always have to remember. You can always make something black and white. And today with Photoshop or Lightroom with HSL, you can take out all the colors that you need, or enhance color. So it doesn't really matter that we have a blue gel in the back. I can just eliminate that in Photoshop or Lightroom. But to go from black and white to color, that's a little bit more difficult. So although when I know I want to go to black and white, I set up my whole setup for a little bit more contrast, I still try to shoot it with the proper color setups. So in this case with blue, because I really thought it enhanced the mood. And in the end, I didn't use any black and whites, I just kept it in color. So make sure that when you set up something like this, you first find the pose and the angle for the lens flare so everything works, and then just use one umbrella or a huge softbox, depending on what you want, for filling light. It really fills in those shadows. And you get something that's really nice and that, in my opinion, almost mimics, well, a cover for an album. Thank you so very much for watching this episode of Digital Classroom. Digital Classroom is made possible by BenQ and Rogue. See you again for the next episode. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Smash that like button, but most of all, tell other people about our channel so we can grow. See you again next time. Bye guys.